Rain hammered the windshield in sheets so thick the wipers could barely keep pace. Ethan Cole squinted through the blur, hands tight on the wheel of his Ford F-150, the truck's headlights carving weak tunnels through the darkness. Montana's Highway 89 stretched empty ahead, slick asphalt gleaming like oil under the storm. He'd driven this road 1,000 times, knew every pothole and curve, but tonight felt different. The kind of different that made a man's gut tighten for no reason he could name. He was coming back from town with a bed full of 2x4s and roof shingles supplies that would eat into what little he'd saved this month. The Crossroads Inn needed repairs the way a dying man needs oxygen, constant, urgent, never quite enough. 3 years since his father's funeral, 3 years of holding together a motel that should have been condemned a decade ago. But it was his now. The only thing Robert Cole had left behind, besides memories and a stack of unpaid bills. The radio crackled, some country station fading in and out. Ethan reached to adjust it, then froze. Something in the road ahead. A shape. Human. He slowed, tires hissing on wet pavement, and the headlights caught her full. A woman. Young, standing at the shoulder with one arm extended, thumb out, rain pouring off her like she'd been there for hours. Her clothes clung to her frame, dark jeans, and what looked like a silk blouse that cost more than his monthly mortgage. No coat, no umbrella, just standing there, soaked to the bone with a look on her face that said she didn't care if he stopped or kept driving. Ethan pulled over, rolled down the passenger window just enough to talk without getting drenched. Need a lift? She stepped closer, mid-20s maybe, hair plastered to her cheeks, mascara streaked, but eyes sharp, guarded. She carried a handbag designer he thought, though he didn't know brands. The leather was caked with mud, one strap torn half off. I got turned around. Was trying to get to town, but I think I walked the wrong way. I don't have a phone. Could I ride with you? Just until the next stop. Her voice was tight, clipped. East Coast accent, the kind you heard in movies about Wall Street. Ethan studied her face in the dim glow of the dashboard. She looked exhausted, vulnerable, but not broken. Not yet. Hop in. She climbed into the cab without hesitation, water dripping onto the seat, and he handed her the flannel blanket he kept behind the headrest. She took it wordlessly, teeth chattering soft as she wrapped it around her shoulders. He cranked the heat up, turned back onto the highway. They drove in silence. The wipers thumped a steady rhythm. The heater wheezed. He glanced at her once, twice. She stared straight ahead, hands clutching the blanket like it was the only solid thing in her world. Name's Ethan. I run a small motel up the road, trying to keep it from falling apart. She turned her head just slightly. Emma, just Emma. He nodded, didn't push. Some silences didn't need filling. His father had taught him that. When someone showed up at your door or your truck at midnight in the rain, you didn't ask questions. You just made room. You, from around here, a pause. Not really. Family nearby, another pause, longer this time. No. He let it drop. They rode the rest of the way without much more talk. The rain began to lighten as they reached the outskirts of town, but the streets were empty. Ethan turned onto a gravel road and pulled into a small parking lot beside a 2-story building with a flickering neon sign that read Crossroads Inn. The V in vacancy, blinked erratically, had been doing that for months. He kept meaning to fix it. The motel was old, siding weathered to the color of driftwood paint peeling in strips, but the windows glowed warm and the front porch light cut through the gloom like a beacon. He killed the engine. I've got a few rooms open. Nothing fancy but dry and with heat. You can stay tonight. No charge. Emma blinked. Her lips parted. I don't have any money. I figured, but it's cold and you look like you've had enough of that. I won't ask questions. Just stay until the storm passes. She stared at him for a moment, lips pressed tight, then nodded. Okay, thank you. He handed her the key to room 12 and led her up the steps. The wooden porch creaked under their weight. He opened the door to a small room, simple but clean. A worn bed, a dresser with a cracked mirror, a lamp glowing warmly in the corner. She stood in the doorway, still holding the blanket, watching him like she expected him to disappear if she blinked too long. There's soup left from dinner. I'll bring you some. You don't have to, I know, but I'm going to. She exhaled something between a laugh and a sob catching in her throat. Good night, Emma. Good night. And for the first time since she'd gotten in his truck, there was something in her voice besides fear. Something fragile. Something that might have been hope. Ethan walked back out into the rain, leaving the door open just a little longer than needed, just enough to let her know that she wasn't alone anymore. Morning came pale and cold. Ethan woke before dawn, habit bred from years of opening the motel to early travelers and late-night stragglers. He showered in the cramped bathroom of room 3, his own quarters, and pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt that smelled faintly of sawdust. The air was sharp when he stepped outside, frost rimming the edges of the porch railing. He was kneeling near the front step with a hammer in hand, replacing a warped floorboard that had finally given up the ghost when he heard footsteps. Light, hesitant, morning. He looked up surprised. Emma stood in the doorway of the lobby, arms wrapped around herself. She wore the same clothes from last night, still damp in places, her hair tied back in a messy knot. She looked like she hadn't slept much. "You're up early. I didn't sleep much. I was wondering if you needed help with anything." Ethan hesitated, hammer still in hand. "You don't have to. I meant it when I said the room's free." "I know, but I'd feel better if I could do something. I'm not used to not helping." He nodded, jerking his thumb toward a stack of folded linens by the counter. "Laundry's piled up. You sure?" She was already moving? Yes. From that moment on, Emma became a quiet presence around the inn. She cleaned rooms, swept the halls, fixed squeaky hinges with a can of WD-40 she found in the supply closet. She even repainted part of the trim around the lobby window using leftover paint, working with a focus that told Ethan she needed the routine more than he needed the help. She never complained, never asked for more than what she'd already been given. And Ethan watched her with quiet appreciation, unsure what to make of the woman who had arrived like a ghost in the rain and now moved through his world like she belonged there. One afternoon, as they reattached the porch railing together, he glanced over at her. "You handy like this everywhere you go?" She smiled, a small, secret sort of smile. "Let's just say I like seeing things put back together." He nodded, didn't press. She had a way of answering just enough without ever giving away more. They began eating together in the tiny kitchen tucked behind the front desk. Ethan cooked simple meals, canned stew, eggs, toast, and she washed dishes, drying each piece with a kind of focus that told him she needed the routine more than he did. Sometimes she told stories, never about herself, never about her past, but always little things. A dream she once had of opening a cafe, a memory of watching deer cross a snowy road, her favorite sound being the soft hum of distant thunder. He listened, and he noticed how often she looked out the window like she was expecting something. Or someone. One night they sat together on the porch steps, watching the moon rise over the trees. The air was cold enough that their breath came in faint clouds. Ethan passed her a mug of tea, and for a while neither of them spoke. Then he asked, "You got people looking for you?" Emma stiffened slightly. "Why do you ask? Just seems like maybe you left something behind. Or someone." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, her voice quiet, almost breaking, "Sometimes leaving is the only way to survive." Ethan looked at her but said nothing. A long pause stretched between them, the kind that felt heavy with things unsaid. Finally she stood. "Thank you for the tea. I'm going to bed." The screen door creaked as she stepped inside and closed it behind her with a soft but final thud. Ethan sat alone in the dark for a long time, mug growing cold in his hands. He didn't know who she was, but he was beginning to suspect she wasn't just a lost traveler. And somewhere deep down, he feared the truth might be something far more complicated than he was ready for. The late afternoon light filtered through the dusty windows of the lobby, casting soft gold across the worn floorboards and faded wallpaper. Emma stood near the counter, surveying the space with a thoughtful tilt of her head. Ethan was restocking the vending machine near the front door when she cleared her throat gently. "I was thinking, the lobby could use a little warmth, some plants maybe, or softer lighting." "The welcome matters, right?" Ethan looked over his shoulder. "You offering to be my interior designer now?" She smiled, the kind that had become more frequent in the past few days. "I could be, if you trust me with it." He set the last soda can in place and closed the vending machine door. "I've seen the way you organize the linen closet. I trust you." And so they began. Emma took charge of small improvements with an energy Ethan found infectious. They moved furniture, repainted walls with soft, neutral tones, and reupholstered 2 armchairs using old fabric she'd found in the supply shed. She found an old wooden sign buried behind the front desk and sanded it down to repaint "Welcome" in fresh white letters. Ethan handled the heavier tasks, letting Emma guide the aesthetics. She had a way of seeing potential in things long forgotten, of making something whole again, with only a few tools and a quiet persistence that Ethan admired more than he cared to admit. They started eating breakfast together in the lobby's corner near the bay window, where Emma had set up a small potted plant and 2 mismatched chairs. The routine felt natural, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. "Do you ever think of leaving?" Emma asked one morning, sipping coffee. Ethan shook his head. "Left too much behind already. This place might be falling apart, but at least it's mine." Emma stared at her cupped fingers tracing the rim. "I used to dream of having a place like that. Something I could build from the ground up. Not a mansion, just something that felt like home." Ethan glanced at her. "Why didn't you?" She hesitated, eyes distant. "Because not everything you're born into lets you choose who you want to be." It was the most personal thing she had ever said. And for a moment, Ethan wondered if he should push, but he didn't. Instead, he nodded and said simply, "Well, you've made this place better already." She smiled. Small, but real. Later that week, while looking for a screwdriver in the supply closet, Ethan knocked over the small canvas bag Emma had tucked away on the top shelf. As it hit the floor, its contents spilled. Clothes, a half-used notebook, and a single sleek black card. It gleamed even in the low light. Ethan stared at it, frozen. A high-end black titanium bank card. American Express Centurion. The kind only people with serious money carried. The name etched in silver made his breath catch. Isabella C. Harrington. Emma entered the room just as he picked it up. Her eyes widened and she quickly stepped forward, snatching the card from his hand. "You okay?" Ethan raised his hands in surprise. Emma held the card tightly, knuckles white. "I didn't mean for you to see that. That's not exactly the kind of cards someone uses at a corner diner." She turned away, shoulders tense. "It's just something I kept for emergencies." "Emma, what's going on? Who are you really?" She didn't answer. Her breath quickened. "I should have been more careful." "Hey." Ethan stepped closer. "I'm not mad. I just want to understand." She shook her head, backing out of the closet. "Please, just let it go." And with that, she turned and walked quickly down the hall, disappearing into her room. The door clicked shut behind her. Ethan stood in the silence that followed, the truth beginning to press in at the edges of everything he thought he knew about the girl who had shown up in the rain. She hadn't just been running from bad weather. She was running from something far bigger. And he had the sinking feeling that their quiet life at the Crossroads Inn was about to get far more complicated. The night was unusually still. A storm had passed through earlier, leaving the air dense and quiet, heavy with the scent of rain on warm earth. The Crossroads Inn stood in the hush of midnight, its flickering porch light fighting off the darkness. Inside, Emma was curled up on the couch in the main office, a book resting on her lap, the soft hum of a space heater filling the room. Ethan had gone to bed hours ago after finishing work on one of the plumbing lines in room 3. The power had flickered once earlier, but then steadied. Emma didn't notice the faint smell of smoke at first. Not until it began to thicken, curling beneath the door like a warning too soft to be heard. She stood coughing once, then again, eyes darting toward the back hallway. That was when she saw it, the glow behind the door to the electrical room. Orange, angry. She rushed forward, but the heat pushed her back. She tried the fire extinguisher, but it was old, rusted shut. The flames leapt fast. The dry wood of the inn fed them greedily. From his room, Ethan woke to the sound of a loud crack, then the unmistakable scent of burning wires. He stumbled from bed barefoot and bolted toward the lobby. "Emma," he shouted, coughing into his sleeve. The smoke was already thick, blinding. He grabbed a wet towel from the sink and wrapped it around his face. The flames were crawling across the ceiling beams now. He moved toward the office. "Emma," he shouted again. A faint voice, coughing, then nothing. He forced the door open and saw her collapse near the couch, trying to crawl, her face pale, her hands shaking. Without thinking, Ethan dove in. The heat seared his arms. The smoke clawed at his lungs, but he reached her. She was barely conscious. He lifted her in his arms and turned back toward the entrance. Each step was harder than the last. The roof groaned. The porch collapsed behind them as he stumbled into the night. He carried her across the gravel lot and fell to his knees in the wet grass near the road, laying her gently down. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "You're okay. You're safe." His voice came out hoarse, broken. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then her eyes closed again. The fire department arrived minutes later. Ethan sat wrapped in a blanket, shivering more from adrenaline than cold. Emma was taken to the hospital. Smoke inhalation, they said. She would recover, but Ethan wasn't allowed to ride with her protocol. By morning, most of the front section of the Crossroads Inn had burned. The fire marshal said it was faulty wiring. The town would send someone about the permits. Ethan stood alone in the ashes-black soot clinging to his skin, the scent of ruin thick around him. That afternoon, when he returned from giving his statement, he found her room empty. No note, no bag, nothing except for the envelope on the front desk. It was thick, heavy, inside a check, 7 figures, and a handwritten note. He stared at the signature at the bottom. Isabella Harrington. He read it twice, then again. The note was short, just one paragraph in looping handwriting. "I did not expect kindness from anyone, least of all from someone who had every reason to turn me away. But you helped me when I was no one. Use this to rebuild. Not just the walls, but the purpose. Make this a place for people who need a beginning. Thank you for seeing me, for not asking who I used to be. Isabella." Ethan sat down in his rubble, still clutching the paper, and let the rain begin to fall again around him. The fire had taken the building, but not everything had been lost. Something had been left behind, something greater than any name on a bank card, and he would not let it go to waste. Ethan stood alone in the center of what used to be the lobby, now stripped bare and scaffolded with fresh beams. The sunlight filtered through newly installed windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The air no longer smelled of smoke, but of cedar and varnish, new paint and beginnings. The Crossroads Inn was being rebuilt, better than before, and yet it had never felt emptier. Days turned into weeks. Contractors came and went. Ethan worked alongside them, sometimes from sunrise to well past sundown. He poured himself into the repairs with a quiet determination, his hands always busy, his thoughts never still. When the check from Isabella cleared, there had been a moment, just one, when he considered returning it. But the note folded neatly beside it had stopped him. Use this to rebuild. So he did. He repaired the damaged rooms, upgraded the wiring, and replaced the roof. The new reception area was brighter, warmer. Emma's touch still lingered in the design. The color palette they had chosen together, the placement of the armchairs by the window, the little coffee bar she once joked about setting up. He built it anyway and placed a jar of sugar packets right where she said they should go. But every evening when the tools were down and the lights dimmed, the silence pressed in harder than the walls. Ethan had no way to find her. She had left no number, no address, no breadcrumbs to follow. Just a name, Isabella Harrington. He had thought of looking her up online a dozen times, but every time he typed the name, his fingers hesitated. It felt like crossing a boundary she had chosen to keep in place. Maybe she didn't want to be found. Still, some nights he drove past the edge of town, the place where he had first seen her standing in the rain, drenched and desperate, asking for a ride with a voice that held both fear and hope. He would slow the truck, stare into the dark roadside, and wonder if maybe, just maybe, she had left a piece of herself there waiting. Then one morning, everything changed. Ethan was in the small cafe down the street, flipping through a worn newspaper while waiting for his order, when a photo caught his eye. A black and white image, small and sharp, embedded in the center of a page filled with business news. Isabella Harrington returns after disappearance. Heiress reemerges months after vanishing from public eye. Ethan's hands froze. He leaned closer, heart thudding. The article spoke of a scandal, a high-profile family, whispers of rebellion, and a sudden disappearance that had sparked rumors across tabloids and boardrooms alike. It mentioned a trust fund, a corporate takeover, and a woman who had walked away from all of it without a word, only to reappear suddenly, quietly, and just as mysteriously as she had left. There was a recent photo. It was her, Emma. Her hair was pinned back, her posture perfect. But her eyes, those eyes he had seen lit by the glow of a fire clouded with smoke, soft with unshed emotion, across a breakfast table, they were unmistakable. He read the article twice, 3 times. She had returned to her world. The article didn't mention where she was now, only that she had declined all interviews and was adjusting privately. Ethan folded the paper carefully, sat back, and stared out the window. So she had a last name, a legacy, a life he had never imagined. But none of that was what stayed with him. What stayed was the sound of her laughter when paint spilled on his shirt, the way her brow furrowed in concentration while sanding a picture frame, the warmth of her hand on his arm the night she had first said thank you, not for the room, but for believing her when she couldn't say who she really was. She had left him a gift far greater than money. She had trusted him with her truth. Now all he could do was honor it. The Crossroads Inn would open again in 2 weeks, and there would be a room just for her, left empty, not forgotten, in case the rain ever brought her back. The package arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Ethan had just finished repainting the final window frame in room 6 when he saw the delivery truck pull up the gravel driveway. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside, surprised. He wasn't expecting any supplies this week. "Package for Mr. Ethan Cole," the driver said, handing over a slim box, long and flat, with a New York return address printed in elegant script. Ethan frowned. He took it carefully, thanked the driver, and brought it inside to the newly renovated lobby. The package felt too light for anything mechanical, too polished to be accidental. He slipped the seal gently with his pocket knife. Inside, he found 2 things. The first was a letter handwritten on thick cream-colored paper. The ink was dark, neat, unmistakably hers. "Ethan, I don't know if words are enough, but they are all I have now. I left quietly because I was scared. Not of you, but of what being known by my real name might change between us. I thought that disappearing would protect what we had built. But I see now that silence is not always kindness. Thank you for the roof, for the warmth, for letting me be Emma when I could not yet be Isabella. Thank you for never asking more than I could give." Enclosed is a small photo I had taken. It was sent to me by someone passing through town. They said the inn looked even better than it did before. "I knew you had finished it. I knew you would. Please keep going. Keep the Crossroads Inn as a place where people feel like they hear enough just as they are. A safe stop in the middle of a storm. A soft light in the dark, with gratitude that words will never fully hold. Isabella. P.S. If you ever find yourself in New York, I owe you a real cup of coffee, one that doesn't come from a gas station." Ethan set the letter down slowly. His chest felt full, tight, warm in a way he hadn't expected. For a long time, he simply sat there, hands folded around the paper, reading and rereading her words. Then he reached into the box again and pulled out the second item, a photo. The Crossroads Inn, taken from across the road at just the right angle to show the newly rebuilt porch, the fresh flower beds, the hand-painted sign above the door. The paint still looked wet in the image, the light golden, as if caught at just the right hour. He smiled. Later that evening, as dusk fell, he stood in the hallway outside the newly renovated room 9, the largest suite in the building. Once it had been damaged, the worst in the fire. Now it gleamed with soft lighting, warm pine floors, and handmade furniture. He carried with him a carved wooden plaque. He had sanded it himself, stained it with care, and carved each letter with slow precision. Rain room. For the night I almost lost everything and found something better. He fixed it to the wall just beside the door. Stepped back, looked at it. It was not just for her. It was for everything they had created in that space between uncertainty and trust, between strangers in the rain and something more. Ethan placed the photo of the inn on the counter at the front desk beside a small vase of wildflowers, and then he whispered, not to anyone in particular. "She came through like a storm, but storms pass, and sometimes they leave the world more alive than they found it." The grand reopening of the Crossroads Inn dawned beneath a sky scrubbed clean by overnight rain. The clouds had scattered like old doubts, and the morning air carried the scent of fresh paint, brewed coffee, and 1,000 quiet hopes. Balloons danced at the mailbox. New curtains fluttered in every window. Locals stopped by with flowers, baked goods, and warm congratulations. Ethan moved through it all with a quiet smile, shaking hands, pouring coffee, answering questions about the new rooms. But every so often, he found himself glancing toward the road, searching for something or someone that was not yet there. He told himself not to hope. By mid-afternoon, most of the guests had left. The lobby, once bustling, now held a gentle stillness. Ethan stepped outside to breathe. The porch creaked under his boots, the same porch he had rebuilt after the fire, and then he saw her. She stood at the edge of the drive, framed by the soft glow of the late afternoon sun. No umbrella this time. No rain. No need to hide. Just her. Hair pinned loosely, a light jacket hugged close to her figure, and a hesitant smile on her lips. He stepped down the stairs without a word. "Hey." Her voice was soft but steady. Ethan stopped in front of her. "You came." She nodded. "I wanted to before, but I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome." "You were always welcome." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Isabella took a deep breath. "I left because I was scared. Not of you, of being seen fully, of being loved as me. Not the girl in the rain, not the heiress, just me." Ethan's eyes searched hers. "I never wanted anything more than that. I know that now. And I'm sorry I made you wonder." He nodded slowly, letting the apology settle like rain into soil. "You didn't owe me anything, but I'm glad you're here." Her lips curved, but the expression trembled. "I came to ask if we could start again." "Start again," Ethan repeated gently. Isabella shook her head. "I don't mean as strangers. I mean as partners. For this place. For whatever comes next. I want to be part of the inn. I want to help run it. I want to give people what you gave me. A safe place when they need it most." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a brass key attached to a tag that read, "Rain Room. I kept this one for you." Her fingers closed around it, slow and reverent. "You're not starting over. You're continuing." They stood together at the base of the stairs. Then she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, "And what about us?" A grin spread across his face, the kind that felt earned. "I think we're just getting started." That evening, as twilight spilled golden across the hills, Isabella helped Ethan serve tea to their first guests. Eli, the local postman, took room 2. A mother and her teenage son traveling west after a rough year settled into room 6. Everyone laughed at the cookies being slightly burnt. Isabella blamed Ethan. Ethan rolled his eyes. The rain room stayed empty, but not for long. Isabella placed her suitcase by the bed before midnight, and in the quiet with the window cracked open to let in the cool breeze, she whispered into the dark, "I'm home." Down the hall, Ethan paused at the door. Then he turned, walked back toward the lobby, and turned off the porch light. He didn't need it tonight. She had already found her way back. 6 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. Isabella moved into the rain room officially, though she spent most of her time working beside Ethan in the office, the kitchen, the supply shed. She handled the bookkeeping with a precision that told him she'd done this before in some other life he didn't ask about. He handled the repairs, the maintenance, the late-night calls from guests who couldn't figure out the thermostat. They were partners now. 50-50, she'd insisted. He'd resisted at first, but she'd been firm. "I'm not doing this out of charity. I'm doing this because I believe in it. In us." And so the Crossroads Inn became theirs. Not his, not hers. Theirs. But the world outside Montana had not forgotten Isabella Harrington. It started with a phone call. Ethan was replacing a faucet in room 4 when his cell buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something told him to. "Is this Ethan Cole?" The voice was male, clipped, professional. "Who's asking?" "My name is Mark Harrington. I'm Isabella's brother. We need to talk." Ethan's grip tightened on the wrench. "About what?" "About my sister. And about a very serious problem that's about to land on your doorstep." Marcus Harrington arrived 3 days later in a black Cadillac Escalade driven by a man in a suit who didn't say a word. Marcus stepped out onto the gravel lot like he was stepping into a boardroom, saw him, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. He extended a hand. "Mr. Cole, thank you for agreeing to meet." Ethan shook it. The grip was firm but not aggressive. "You said it was urgent. It is. May we speak inside?" They sat in the lobby, Marcus in one of the reupholstered armchairs, Ethan on the edge of the desk. Isabella was out running errands in town. Marcus glanced around the space, taking it in with an expression Ethan couldn't read. "You've done well with the place. Isabella mentioned you rebuilt it from the ground up." "We did. Together." Marcus nodded. "That's why I'm here. My sister has always been headstrong. But this is different. She's not just running anymore. She's putting down roots. And that makes her vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? To people who don't want her to be happy. People who see her as a threat. Ethan's jaw tightened. You talking about your family? Marcus didn't flinch. I'm talking about a man named Lawrence Blackwell. And if you care about Isabella, you need to understand what you're up against. Lawrence Blackwell III, 47 years old, CEO of Blackwell Corporation, a real estate development conglomerate with holdings across 30 states. Net worth estimated at $3 billion. And according to Marcus, obsessed with Isabella Harrington. He was supposed to marry her. Our father arranged it before he died. A merger of two empires. Isabella refused, ran the night before the wedding. Lawrence took it as a personal insult. Ethan leaned forward. So what's he doing now? Marcus pulled a folder from his briefcase. Laid it on the desk. Ethan opened it. Inside were photos, legal documents, bank transfers. Lawrence doesn't take no for an answer. He's been buying up land around this area, small parcels, through shell companies. So far, he's acquired 8 properties within a 5-mile radius of this inn. Ethan's blood went cold. Why? Because he knows Isabella is here, and he's going to make it impossible for you to operate. He'll buy the land, raise taxes, lobby the county to enforce codes you can't afford to meet. He'll choke you out slowly, and when you're desperate, he'll offer to buy this place for pennies on the dollar. And if I refuse, then things get worse. Marcus leaned back, his expression grim. Lawrence has done this before. In Colorado, a family-owned resort refused to sell. 3 months later, the health department shut them down for violations they swore they didn't commit. The owner lost everything, sold to Lawrence for a fraction of what it was worth. Ethan closed the folder. Why are you telling me this? Because my sister loves you, and I'm tired of watching her be a pawn in other people's games. Isabella returned an hour later, arms full of groceries. She froze when she saw Marcus in the lobby. What are you doing here? Marcus stood. Hello, Bella. Don't call me that. Her voice was ice. Ethan moved to her side. He came to warn us about Blackwell. Isabella's face went pale. She set the bags down slowly. What has he done? Marcus repeated the information. The land acquisitions, the shell companies, the pattern. Isabella listened in silence, her hands clenched into fists. When he finished, she looked at Ethan. I'm sorry, I thought he would let it go. He won't, Marcus said quietly. He never does. Isabella turned to her brother, eyes blazing. Then we fight him. With what? He has unlimited resources, lawyers, politicians. You think you can beat him from a motel in Montana? We beat Victoria. Marcus shook his head. Victoria was a vulture. Lawrence is a predator. There's a difference, Ethan spoke up, his voice calm but firm. Then we make it public. Expose him. Marcus looked at him surprised. You think the media cares about one motel? They will if Isabella Harrington is involved. The plan took shape over the next week. Isabella would hold a press conference, not in New York, here, at the Crossroads Inn. She would tell her story. The arranged marriage, the escape, Lawrence's obsession, his attempts to destroy the one place she'd found peace. Marcus was skeptical. You're risking everything. Your reputation, your privacy. Once you go public, there's no taking it back. Isabella didn't hesitate. I'm not hiding anymore. Ethan helped her draft the statement. They worked late into the night, laptops open on the kitchen table, coffee mugs piling up. She wrote with a ferocity he hadn't seen before, each word a blow against the cage she'd lived in for 27 years. When she finished, she read it aloud. Her voice didn't waver. My name is Isabella Catherine Harrington. 3 months ago, I walked away from a life I didn't choose. I walked away from a man who saw me as property, not a person. I walked away from a world that valued my last name more than my humanity. And I found something I'd been searching for my entire life, a place where I could be myself. That place is the Crossroads Inn. That place is with Ethan Cole. Lawrence Blackwell wants to take that from me. He wants to punish me for saying no. But I will not be silent anymore. I will not let fear decide my future. And I will not let him hurt the people I love. Ethan looked at her across the table. You sure about this? She met his eyes. I've never been more sure of anything. The press conference was scheduled for a Thursday morning. 23 reporters showed up, some from local Montana papers. Others from national outlets, CNN, New York Times, Forbes. They set up cameras in the lobby, microphones clustered on a small podium Ethan had built from scrap wood. Isabella stood behind it, dressed simply in jeans and a white blouse. No makeup, no jewelry, just her. Ethan stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. She read her statement. Her voice was steady, clear. When she finished, the questions came fast. Miss Harrington, are you accusing Mr. Blackwell of harassment? I'm accusing him of trying to control my life through intimidation and economic pressure. Do you have proof? Marcus stepped forward, handing out copies of the land transfers. The reporters flipped through them, cameras clicking. What do you hope to accomplish with this? Isabella looked directly into the cameras. I hope to show that money and power don't give you the right to destroy someone's life because they rejected you. I hope other women see this and know they don't have to stay in situations that diminish them. And I hope Lawrence Blackwell understands that I am not afraid of him anymore. The room went silent. Then from the back, a voice, Miss Harrington, are you in love with Mr. Cole? Isabella didn't hesitate. Yes. The cameras exploded with light. Ethan's breath caught. She turned to look at him, a small grin tugging at her lips. And he's taught me that love doesn't require sacrifice. It requires honesty. That's what I'm doing here, being honest. The fallout was immediate. Within 24 hours, the story was everywhere. Social media lit up. Hashtag Stand With Isabella trended. Lawrence Blackwell's lawyers issued a statement denying all allegations. But the damage was done. Investors began pulling out of Blackwell Corporation's upcoming projects. The stock price dropped 6% in a single day. Marcus called that evening. You did it. He's retreating. Ethan could hear the relief in his voice. Isabella took the phone. What does that mean? It means he's cutting his losses. His legal team advised him to settle quietly. He's selling off the Montana parcels. You won, this time. Isabella exhaled. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me. Thank your stubborn streak. And that man standing next to you. She hung up and turned to Ethan. He was leaning against the counter, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. You okay? She nodded. I'm more than okay. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, breathing him in sawdust and coffee, and something unmistakably him. I meant it, what I said to the reporters. I know, he pulled back just enough to look at her. I love you too, in case that wasn't obvious. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass turning into music. It was a little obvious. 3 weeks later, Gerald Mitchell walked into the Crossroads Inn. He was a man in his mid-50s, sharp suit, slicked back hair, and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Ethan was behind the desk when he approached. Mr. Cole, I'm Gerald Mitchell, Summit Ridge Development Corporation. I'd like to discuss a business opportunity. Ethan's expression didn't change. Not interested. Mitchell chuckled. You haven't even heard the offer. Don't need to. I'm not selling. Mitchell leaned on the counter, his grin fading. This area is changing, Mr. Cole. Tourism is booming. Property values are rising. You could make a fortune if you play this right. Or I could keep doing what I'm doing. Mitchell straightened. Suit yourself. But opportunities like this don't come around twice. Think about it. He left a business card on the counter and walked out. Ethan picked it up, turned it over. On the back, handwritten in pen, $1.8 million. Final offer. He tore it in half. But Mitchell didn't give up. Over the next month, he returned 3 more times. Each visit, the offer increased. $2 million, 2.2, 2.5. Each time, Ethan refused. And each time, Mitchell's demeanor grew colder. Then the violations started. First, a notice from the county health department. Improper ventilation in the kitchen. Ethan had the system inspected just 6 months ago. It was fine. He paid for a re-inspection. Passed. 2 weeks later, another notice. Fire code violations. Emergency exits not up to standard. Again, he just had them checked. Again, he paid to fix what wasn't broken. The third violation came with a deadline. Fix the issues within 30 days or face closure. The estimated cost, $350,000. Money they didn't have. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. Isabella stood behind him, fingers resting lightly on his shoulders. We could take out a loan. We're already leveraged to the ceiling. Then we sell something. The land behind the inn. We don't need all 5 acres. Ethan shook his head. The land is what makes this place safe. Open space. No neighbors crowding in. That's what people come here for. She circled around to face him. Then what? He looked up at her, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. I don't know, but we'll figure it out. We always do. The fire happened on a Tuesday night. Ethan woke to the smell of smoke and the crackle of flames. He bolted from bed, grabbed his phone, and dialed 911 while running toward the source. The storage shed behind the main building was fully engulfed. Flames licked up the siding, reaching toward the roof. Isabella appeared beside him, barefoot and wide-eyed. Oh, God. He grabbed her arm. Get back. Call the fire department again. Make sure they're coming. She ran. He grabbed the garden hose, knowing it was useless but trying anyway. The water barely made a dent. The shed was old, filled with paint cans and turpentine, and God knew what else his father had stored over the years. It went up like kindling. The fire trucks arrived within 15 minutes. By then, the shed was gone. The main building was untouched, but the damage was done. Ethan stood in the grass, soot-streaked and shaking, watching the firefighters hose down the embers. The fire chief approached. Lucky it didn't spread. But we found something you need to see. He led Ethan to the remains of the shed, pulled back a charred beam, underneath a metal canister. Scorched but intact. The chief opened it. Inside, wadded up rags soaked in accelerant. This wasn't an accident. Ethan's jaw clenched. Mitchell. Can't prove it. But yeah, that'd be my guess. The sheriff came the next morning, took statements, collected evidence, but without witnesses or cameras, there wasn't much to go on. Mitchell had an alibi. He was in Denver for a conference. His assistant confirmed it. The investigation stalled. Isabella paced the lobby, fury radiating off her in waves. He tried to burn us out. We both know it. Ethan's voice was calm, but his hands shook as he poured coffee. Then we prove it. She stopped, turned to face him. How? She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Marcus, and we're going to find out who Gerald Mitchell really works for. Marcus had the answer within 48 hours. Summit Ridge Development Corporation was a shell company, owned by another shell company, which was owned by Blackwell Corporation. Lawrence, Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus confirmed it over speakerphone. He bought Mitchell's loyalty, told him to make your life hell until you sold. The fire was probably Mitchell's idea, but Lawrence gave him the green light. Ethan's fists clenched. Can we prove it? Not legally, not yet, but I have a forensic accountant tracing the money. If we can connect the payments directly to Lawrence, we have a case. How long will that take? Weeks? Maybe months? Isabella looked at Ethan. We don't have months. Then we go public again. Louder this time. The second press conference was held at the Crossroads Inn, but this time Isabella brought receipts, financial records, email correspondences between Mitchell and a Blackwell Corporation VP, photos of the burned shed, a timeline showing every violation notice coinciding with Mitchell's visits. She stood before the cameras, Ethan at her side, and spoke with a clarity that cut through every objection. Lawrence Blackwell is a man who believes he can buy anything, including people. When I refused to marry him, he decided to punish me. Not directly, that would be too obvious. Instead, he hired a man named Gerald Mitchell to destroy the one place I've found peace. Mitchell tried bribery, then intimidation, then arson, all to force us to sell, all because Lawrence Blackwell cannot accept that I chose someone else. The reporters erupted, questions flew. Isabella answered each one with precision. Miss Harrington, do you fear for your safety? I fear for anyone who stands up to powerful men and gets crushed for it. But I'm not backing down. Mr. Cole, what do you say to allegations that you're using Miss Harrington for her money? Ethan stepped forward, voice low and steady. I turned down $500,000 from her brother to walk away. I turned down $2.5 million from Mitchell to sell this place. The only thing I want from Isabella is the life we're building together. If that makes me an opportunist, then I don't know what integrity looks like anymore. The room went silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, half the reporters were applauding. The backlash against Blackwell Corporation was swift and brutal. Major investors pulled out. 3 board members resigned. The SEC opened an investigation into the shell companies. Lawrence's lawyers scrambled to contain the damage, but it was too late. Mitchell disappeared. Ethan heard through the sheriff that he'd skipped town, last seen boarding a flight to Mexico. The arson investigation went cold without him. But the victory felt hollow. The Crossroads Inn was still standing, but the fight had taken its toll. Ethan was exhausted. Isabella was thinner shadows under her eyes. They moved through the days like ghosts maintaining the inn serving guests, but the joy had leaked out of it. One night, lying in bed, Isabella turned to him. "Do you ever regret it, letting me stay that first night?" Ethan didn't answer right away. "Then no. But I regret that loving you came with a war." She rolled to face him, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry, I brought this into your life. You brought yourself into my life. The rest was just noise. It's not noise if it almost killed us. But it didn't. We're still here." She pressed her forehead to his. "I don't know how much more I can take. Then we rest. We rebuild. Again. As many times as it takes." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Promise me it gets easier." He kissed her temple. "I can't promise that, but I can promise I'm not going anywhere." The months that followed were quieter. The media moved on to other scandals. Lawrence Blackwell settled out of court, agreeing to sell off all Montana holdings and issue a public apology. It was vague and lawyered to death, but it was something. Ethan and Isabella threw themselves into the inn. They expanded the garden, built a small playground for families with kids, renovated the pool that had been sitting empty since before his father died. Slowly, the Crossroads Inn transformed from a survivor's refuge into a thriving business. And somewhere in the middle of hammering and painting and late-night planning sessions, Ethan realized something. He was happy. Not in the reckless, untested way of early love, but in the deep, bone-settled way of a man who'd found his place in the world. One evening, as they stood on the porch watching the sun dip below the mountains, he turned to her. "Marry me." Isabella froze, turned to look at him. He wasn't on one knee, didn't have a ring, just stood there in his flannel shirt and jeans, hands in his pockets, looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered. "What, marry me, Bella? Not because it makes sense, not because we've been through hell together, but because I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life knowing you're here. Knowing this is ours." She stared at him, mouth open, eyes filling. "Ethan, you don't have to answer now. Think about it. But I needed you to know. I'm all in. Have been since the night you showed up in the rain." Isabella's breath came in short gasps. Then she laughed a wild, broken sound and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, you ridiculous man, yes." He spun her around, both of them laughing, and when he set her down, he kissed her like it was the first time. Like it was the last time. Like it was every time in between. And in the fading light, the Crossroads Inn stood witness. Quiet, steady, home. The wedding was set for December, 3 days before Christmas. Isabella had refused every suggestion of a lavish ceremony. No ballroom in Manhattan, no society photographers, no 500-person guest list curated by publicists. Just the Crossroads Inn. Just the people who mattered. Just them. They spent the weeks leading up to it, transforming the property into something out of a winter postcard. Ethan strung white lights along the porch railing and through the branches of the massive pine tree in the front yard. Isabella hung wreaths on every door, each one handmade with pine cones and red ribbon. The scent of cinnamon and wood smoke filled the air. Snow fell in soft flurries, blanketing the ground in white. Marcus arrived 2 days early, driving himself this time in a rented SUV. He stepped out wearing a wool coat and boots, looking more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen him. He shook Ethan's hand on the porch. "Good to see you again." Ethan nodded. "You too. Thanks for coming. Wouldn't miss it. My sister finally getting what she deserves, wouldn't be anywhere else." Isabella appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When she saw Marcus, her face lit up. She ran down the steps and hugged him tight. He held her for a long moment, eyes closed, and when they pulled apart, Ethan saw something he hadn't expected. Marcus was crying. "I'm proud of you, Bella." His voice was rough, choked. Isabella's own eyes glistened. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have. But I'm glad I got to help." The ceremony was held in the backyard beneath the pine tree. 87 people showed up. Locals from town, guests who'd stayed at the inn over the past year, a few of Isabella's college friends who'd flown in from New York. Joe, Ethan's friend from the auto shop, stood as best man. A woman named Sarah, one of the first guests they'd helped, a single mother fleeing an abusive marriage, stood as maid of honor. She'd been living in the area for 6 months now, working at a bakery in town, rebuilding her life one day at a time. Ethan wore a simple gray suit, no tie. Isabella wore a white dress she'd found in a boutique in Billings, lace sleeves, flowing skirt. Nothing extravagant, her hair was down loose around her shoulders. She carried a bouquet of white roses and sprigs of pine. The officiant was a retired judge who'd known Ethan's father. He kept the words brief, spoke about love as a choice renewed every day, about partnership as the foundation of everything worthwhile. Then he turned to Ethan. "Do you have vows?" Ethan pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. His hand shook slightly as he unfolded it. He looked at Isabella. "When you showed up here, I didn't know who you were, didn't know your name or where you came from. All I knew was that you needed help. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as someone to save and started seeing you as someone I couldn't live without. You taught me that love isn't about fixing people. It's about standing beside them while they fix themselves. You taught me that strength doesn't mean never falling apart. It means putting yourself back together and trying again. I promise to stand beside you, to build with you, to fight for you, and to never let you forget that you're enough, just as you are." His voice cracked on the last words. Isabella's tears spilled over. She took his hands, her own trembling, and spoke without notes. "I spent my whole life being told who I should be, what I should want, who I should marry. And I ran because I couldn't breathe under the weight of it all. But when I got here, when I met you, I realized I wasn't running from something. I was running toward you, toward this, toward a life where I could be myself, and that would be enough. You gave me a place to land, a place to heal, a place to love, and I promised to protect that, to honor it, to never take for granted what we built together. Because you didn't save me, Ethan. You gave me the space to save myself. And that's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." The judge smiled. "By the power vested in me by the state of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss." Ethan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly. The crowd erupted in applause. Snow drifted down around them, catching in Isabella's hair, melting on Ethan's shoulders. When they pulled apart, both were beaming through tears. Marcus stepped forward, clapping Ethan on the back. "Welcome to the family." Ethan grinned. "Thanks, I think." The reception was held in the main dining area of the inn. They'd pushed the tables together, covered them in white linens, set out platters of barbecue and roasted vegetables and homemade rolls. Sarah had baked the cake, 3 tiers of vanilla sponge with buttercream frosting decorated with fresh flowers. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. Speeches came after dinner. Joe went first, raising a glass of whiskey. "I've known Ethan since high school, back when he thought he was going to be a professional carpenter and build mansions for rich folks. Then his dad got sick, and he came home, and I watched him pour everything he had into this place. Watched him work 18-hour days trying to keep it alive. And I'm not gonna lie, I thought he was crazy. But then he met Bella, and suddenly it made sense. This place isn't just a motel, it's a home. And you two, you're proof that home isn't a place, it's a person. Congratulations." Everyone clapped. Sarah stood, next glass of sparkling cider in hand. "I came here 6 months ago with nothing. No money, no plan, just my son and a suitcase full of fear. And Ethan and Bella gave me a room. No questions asked. They didn't just give me shelter. They gave me hope. They showed me that kindness still exists in this world, that there are people who will help you not because they want something from you, but because it's the right thing to do. So thank you for everything. And congratulations on finding each other. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Her voice broke. She sat down quickly, wiping her eyes. Isabella reached over and squeezed her hand. Marcus was last. He stood slowly adjusting his cufflinks and looked around the room. "Most of you don't know me. I'm Isabella's older brother, and for a long time I didn't understand her. I thought she was spoiled, ungrateful, running from responsibility. But I was wrong. She wasn't running from responsibility. She was running towards something real, something true. And Ethan, you gave her that. You gave her a life where she could be herself, where she didn't have to perform or pretend. And for that, I will always be grateful. My father would have loved you, both of you, and he would have been so proud of what you have built here. So here's to Ethan and Bella. May you have a lifetime of happiness, and may this place continue to be a light for everyone who needs it." He raised his glass. The room echoed with the clinking glasses and murmured toasts. Ethan stood pulling Isabella to her feet, and they danced to an acoustic guitar version of At Last, played by a local musician. Her head rested on his shoulder, his hand pressed against the small of her back. And for a few minutes, the world shrank to just the two of them, swaying in the soft glow of candlelight. 3 months later, winter gave way to spring. The snow melted, revealing fresh green grass and wildflowers sprouting along the edges of the property. The Crossroads Inn was busier than ever, families on road trips, couples looking for a quiet weekend, and increasingly people like Sarah folks who needed more than just a bed for the night. Isabella had formalized the program. Half the rooms were now reserved for what she called transition guests, people escaping bad situations, veterans struggling with PTSD, single parents trying to get back on their feet. They could stay for up to 3 months free of charge, while Isabella helped them find jobs, housing, and support services. She'd set up a nonprofit to fund it, drawing on a portion of her trust fund and donations from people who'd read about their story in the press. Ethan handled the maintenance and day-to-day operations. Isabella handled the nonprofit and outreach. Together, they built something neither of them could have managed alone. One evening in late April, they sat on the porch after a long day. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Isabella leaned against Ethan, her hand resting on his knee. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" Ethan considered the question. "Sometimes, but not often. Feels like a waste of time to wonder about things that didn't happen." Her lips curved upward. "Always so practical. Someone has to be." She tilted her head to look up at him. "I'm pregnant." Ethan froze, blinked, looked at her. "What, I'm pregnant? About 12 weeks. He stared at her, processing, then a slow grin spread across his face. "Are you serious, Very?" He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she laughed. "When did you find out?" "2 days ago. I took 3 tests just to be sure. And you waited to tell me. I wanted to find the right moment." Ethan pulled back, cupping her face. "Bella, every moment with you is the right moment." Her eyes filled. "I'm scared." "Me too. But we'll figure it out, just like we figured out everything else." She nodded, resting her forehead against his. "I love you. I love you too. Both of you." The pregnancy was smooth. Isabella worked through the first trimester morning sickness and all, refusing to slow down until Ethan finally put his foot down in month 5. "You're carrying our kid. You need to rest. I'm pregnant, not broken." "I know, but if you collapse from exhaustion, I'm going to feel like a terrible husband." She relented. Handed off more of the nonprofit work to a part-time coordinator they'd hired. Spent her afternoons reading baby books and nesting, as she called it, organizing the small room they'd converted into a nursery. The baby was due in early December. They decided not to find out the gender. Wanted it to be a surprise. Marcus flew in for the baby shower, bringing a mountain of gifts, including a handmade crib he'd commissioned from a woodworker in Vermont. "You didn't have to do this," Isabella said, running her hand over the smooth oak. Marcus shrugged. "I wanted to. Besides, I'm going to spoil this kid rotten. Might as well start now." Ethan laughed. "Great. Just what we need." Grace Elizabeth Cole was born on December 3rd at 2 in the morning. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. A head full of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. Ethan held her for the first time in the hospital room, tears streaming down his face, completely undone. "She's perfect." Isabella, exhausted and glowing, beamed from the bed. "She's ours." They brought her home 3 days later. The Crossroads Inn had never felt so full. Sarah stopped by with a casserole. Joe brought diapers. Marcus sent flowers and a card that read, "Welcome to the world, Grace. You have no idea how lucky you are." The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Ethan learned to function on 4 hours of sleep. Isabella learned to pump milk while answering emails. They tag-teamed diaper changes and took turns walking Grace around the lobby when she wouldn't settle. But through the exhaustion, there was joy. Pure, unfiltered joy. Grace's first birthday came and went in a whirlwind. She was walking by then, wobbling around the inn with a determination that reminded Ethan of her mother. She loved the guests toddling up to anyone who grinned at her and babbling nonsense. Sarah's son, now 7, appointed himself her unofficial big brother, teaching her to stack blocks and making her laugh with silly faces. The Crossroads Inn had grown into something beyond a business. It was a community, a family. People who'd stayed there years ago still sent Christmas cards. Some visited every summer, bringing their kids to play in the same rooms where they'd once found refuge. Isabella expanded the nonprofit, opened a second location in Colorado, then a third in Arizona. Each one modeled after the Crossroads, half-paying guests, half-transition support. Ethan stayed in Montana managing the flagship inn and raising Grace while Isabella traveled for board meetings and site visits. It worked, imperfectly, but it worked. One afternoon in early summer, Ethan was fixing a loose railing on the front porch when a car pulled into the lot. A beat-up Honda Civic with out-of-state plates, a woman got out, early 30s. Wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt, hair pulled back in a ponytail, she looked around uncertain, then walked toward the porch. "Is this the Crossroads Inn?" Ethan straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "It is. Can I help you? I saw an article about this place, about what you do for people who need help." Her voice was shaky. Ethan set down the hammer. "Come on in. Let's talk." Her name was Rachel. She'd left an abusive relationship 2 weeks ago, driven halfway across the country with her daughter asleep in the back seat. She had $300 to her name and no plan beyond getting as far away as possible. Ethan called Isabella. She came down from the office, Grace toddling beside her. Isabella sat with Rachel for an hour, listening, asking gentle questions, taking notes. When they were done, she handed Rachel a key. "Room 8. It's yours for as long as you need it. No charge." Rachel's eyes filled. I don't have money to pay you back." "You don't need to. That's not how this works. But why, you don't even know me." Isabella glanced at Ethan, then back at Rachel. "Because someone helped me when I needed it. And now I get to help you. That's how kindness works. It's a gift you pass forward, not a debt you repay." Rachel broke down. Isabella held her while she cried, Grace watching with wide eyes from Ethan's arms. When Rachel finally pulled herself together, she looked at them both. "Thank you." "I don't know what else to say." Ethan's expression softened. "You don't have to say anything, just rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps." 6 months later, Rachel had a job at a local clinic, an apartment in town, and primary custody of her daughter. She stopped by the inn every few weeks, bringing cookies or helping with odd jobs. She became part of the extended family that had grown around the Crossroads. Isabella often thought about that, how one act of kindness rippled outward, creating waves that touched people she'd never meet. It was the legacy she wanted to leave. Not a hotel empire, not a fortune, just proof that compassion mattered. One night, lying in bed with Ethan beside her and Grace asleep in the nursery down the hall, she said as much. "Do you think we're doing enough?" Ethan turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there are so many people who need help, and we can only reach a fraction of them." He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We can't save everyone, Bella, but we can save the people who walk through that door. And those people go on to help others. It's not about the numbers. It's about the impact." She sighed. "I know. But sometimes I feel like it's not enough. It's enough for Rachel, for Sarah, for every person who stayed here and found hope. That's not nothing." She closed her eyes, letting his words settle. "You're right. I want to do more." "Then we will. But we don't have to do it all at once." Grace turned 2, then 3, then 4. The years blurred together in the best way, milestones and mundane moments woven into a life that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Ethan taught Grace to use a hammer, holding her tiny hands steady as she tapped nails into scrap wood. Isabella taught her to read, curling up with her on the couch every night, sounding out words together. Marcus visited twice a year, always bearing gifts. He'd married a woman named Claire, a corporate lawyer with a sharp wit and a kind heart. They had a son, making Grace a cousin she adored. The two families spent Christmases together, filling the inn with laughter and chaos and love. The Crossroads expanded again. A 4th location in Texas, a 5th in Oregon. Isabella hired a full-time executive director to oversee operations while she focused on fundraising and strategy. Ethan stayed rooted in Montana, unwilling to uproot Grace or leave the original inn. It was the right call. The Crossroads Inn in Montana remained the heart of everything. The place where it all started. The place people returned to year after year because it felt like home. On a crisp October morning, 5 years after Grace was born, Isabella stood in the lobby, coffee in hand, watching guests check in. A young couple with a toddler, an older man traveling alone, a woman who looked like she'd been driving all night, eyes red-rimmed and haunted. Isabella approached her. "Welcome to the crossroads. I'm Bella." The woman hesitated. I, I don't have a reservation. I wasn't sure if you'd have space." "We always have space." "What's your name, Emily?" Isabella's expression warmed. "It's nice to meet you, Emily. Let me get you set up." As she led Emily to the front desk, she felt a tap on her leg, looked down to see Grace Pigtails askew holding up a drawing. "Mama, I made this for you." It was a crayon sketch of the inn. Stick figures stood in front, Ethan, Isabella, and Grace holding hands. Above them, in wobbly letters, "Home." Isabella crouched down, pulling Grace into a hug. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." "Thank you." Grace beamed. "Can we hang it up?" "Absolutely." She stood taking Grace's hand, and together they walked to the wall behind the front desk. There was a cork board there filled with photos and thank you notes from past guests. Isabella pinned the drawing in the center, stepping back to admire it. Perfect. That evening, after Grace was in bed and the last guests had retired to their rooms, Ethan and Isabella sat on the porch. The air was cool, autumn leaves rustling in the breeze. The inn glowed softly behind them, every window a warm square of light. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Ethan asked. Isabella's lips curved. "All the time." "Do you regret it? Any of it?" She shook her head. "Not even a little." He leaned back, hands behind his head. "Only that I didn't stop sooner." She laughed, nudging him with her elbow. "You stopped exactly when you were supposed to." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Isabella spoke, her voice quiet. "I've been thinking about the future. Yeah, I want to write a book about all of this. The inn, the people we've helped, us." Ethan looked at her surprised. "You think people would want to read that?" "I think people need to know that kindness still exists. That one person can make a difference. That love is real and worth fighting for." He nodded slowly. "Then you should write it." She turned to him. "Would you be okay with that?" "With our story being out there, as long as you tell it true, I'm okay with it." She kissed him slow and soft. "Thank you." The book took 2 years to write. Isabella worked on it in stolen moments, early mornings before Grace woke, late nights after the inn was quiet. She interviewed guests, collected stories, wove together a narrative that was part memoir, part manifesto. When she finished, she sent it to a handful of publishers. 3 made offers. She chose a small press in Seattle that specialized in social justice and advocacy work. The book was released the following spring. The Rain Room: How One Night Changed Everything. It hit the New York Times bestseller list within 2 weeks, stayed there for 6 months. Readers wrote letters, shared stories, started their own versions of the crossroads in cities across the country. Isabella was invited to speak at conferences, universities, nonprofit galas. She said yes to some no, to most, always prioritizing time with Grace and Ethan. The attention brought more donations, more volunteers, more people wanting to help. The Harrington Foundation grew beyond anything Isabella had imagined. By the time Grace started kindergarten, there were 15 crossroads inns across 12 states, serving thousands of people every year. But the original inn in Montana remained Isabella's favorite. It was where she'd found herself, where she'd fallen in love, where she'd become a mother. And no amount of success could ever eclipse the quiet miracle of that. Grace started first grade the same year Ethan turned 42. He was graying at the temples, now lines etched around his eyes from years of squinting in the sun. Isabella, at 33, had found a confidence she'd never possessed before. She walked taller, spoke louder, her laughter came easier. They were building a life they were proud of. Not perfect, but real. One Saturday morning, Grace came running into the kitchen waving a piece of paper. "Mama, Daddy, look, I wrote a story." Isabella took the paper, Ethan reading over her shoulder. It was titled "The Girl in the Rain," and told the story of a princess who ran away from a castle and found a magical inn where people were kind and nobody cared about crowns. "This is amazing, sweetheart," Isabella said, kneeling down to Grace's level. Grace beamed. "It's about you." Tears pricked Isabella's eyes. "You think so, uh-huh? Because you're the bravest person I know." Ethan ruffled Grace's hair. "Your mom's pretty great, huh?" Grace nodded emphatically. "The best." The years kept moving. Grace grew. The inn grew. The foundation grew. And through it all, Ethan and Isabella held steady. They fought sometimes about money, about schedules, about whose turn it was to handle the 3 a.m. plumbing emergency. But they always came back to each other, always remembered why they were doing this. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Isabella with a weekend away. Marcus flew in to watch Grace shooing them out the door with strict instructions not to call unless the place was on fire. They drove to a cabin in the mountains 2 hours from the inn. No cell service, no internet, just them. They hiked, cooked meals together, sat by the fire and talked for hours the way they used to before life got so busy. On the last night lying in bed under a quilt, Isabella traced the scar on Ethan's hand, the one from the night of the fire. Do you ever wish things had been easier? He thought about it. No, easy doesn't build character, and character is what holds you together when everything else falls apart. Her expression softened. When did you get so wise? I married you, didn't I? She laughed, swatting his chest. Seriously, though, I'm glad it was hard. It made us stronger. He kissed her forehead. Me too, 8 years later. Grace was in college now, studying social work at the University of Montana, determined to follow in her parents' footsteps. The Crossroads network had expanded to 23 states, each location carrying the same mission, a safe place for people to begin again. Ethan at 50 moved a little slower these days, his back protesting after long hours of repair work, but his hands were still steady, his heart still fierce. Isabella at 41 had written 2 more books, both bestsellers, and spoke at conferences around the world about compassionate capitalism and community-driven change. But Montana remained home. The original Crossroads Inn remained the center of everything. One autumn afternoon, Ethan was fixing a loose railing on the front porch when a car pulled into the lot. A beat-up sedan with plates from 3 states away. A young woman got out, looking lost and scared. She walked toward the porch, clutching a worn duffel bag. Is this the Crossroads Inn? Ethan nodded. It is. You need a place to stay. She hesitated. I don't have money. Isabella stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand. You don't need money. Come on in. As they led her inside, Ethan glanced back at the road, remembering another night, another woman, another beginning. And he smiled, because that was the thing about kindness. It never ended. It just kept going, one person at a time, one moment at a time, building something bigger than any of them could have imagined. The Crossroads Inn stood quiet beneath the Montana sky. The lights glowed warm, the door was open, and somewhere inside, another story was just beginning.